Before we start the video, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I appreciate all the support I received from you. And as always, all the information in my videos is rumors taken from the internet or the street. I'm not saying the information is fact.
Pick your mans up.
Yeah, just because people used to come through shooting us every day. Yeah, this block, words can't even explain. Can't even explain.
Yeah, man. Little school Valley, 05 way on money. Young money, man. They in the building.
600 boy, LA, man. LA Capone, man. Get it to him, man. OC2 boys, man. Team
Rondo number 9, man. Number 9 shooter, you hear me?
Hey, bitch, little bitch. Yeah. What is wrong with you? Hey, I am Brick Squad. Brick Squad, what the fuck is you talking about, bro?
You have to be willing to die or go to jail for 100 years if that's the lane that you're stepping in. You have to understand that whether you're 15, 16, you got to think like a man. You know what I'm saying?
So don't be in it. Oh, you're not? Why does everybody say you're only 16 years old?
They say what they want to say.
How old
How old are you?
300.
The story of Shoota Shellz.
Through a lot of my life, man. You feel my OG passed when I was like 11. My pops died when I was like 9.
Hold on, bro. Yo.
That shit it's a lot, you feel me? You know, you deal with family issues, you feel me? It's all type of shit, you feel me? Motherfuckers go on and they like, and then to come to this shit, you feel me? All this street shit, that's a lot. A motherfucker gotta mature, you gotta mature fast, you gotta grow up, you gotta take care of yourself out here, you feel me?
This is the story of Shellz, also known as the rapper Shoota Shellz. This is a very sad story about a boy who early in life lost both his parents, was quickly drawn into the criminal and destructive life, took lives from other families, lost one of his brothers, and then met the same fate himself. Shellz grew up on the east side of Chicago, which is seen as the worst and most dangerous side of Chicago. Not only that, he grew up in the most dangerous area on the east side, called Terrortown, which is a territory that No Limit shares together with BlackMobb. Shellz grew up on BlackMobb territory, which is located on 74th, 75th and Phillips. He grew up there with his mom, dad and brother Scoops, and maybe another brother. However, if I understand correctly, he did not grow up with him, and he is not involved in gang life and lives in Michigan. Shoota Shellz was the younger brother of him and Scoops. Shellz went to elementary school on the 75th and South Shore. Already as a young kid in 6th grade, there were fights between different schools in the area, and that was really where it started between Lakeside, BlackMobb and No Limit. Even at that time, the years 2006 to 2008, there were always fights between the different groups of friends, both inside and outside the school. The years around 2004 to 2007 were also very tough years for Shoota Shellz. When Shellz was only 9 years old, his father was murdered in Chicago. 2 years later, when he was 11, he lost his mother. I do not know how his mother died, but I have heard that it was due to natural reasons. Shellz thus became an orphan when he was only 11 years old. Because of this, Shoota Shellz entered the criminal life fairly quickly. His older brother Scoops was already in that life. Since Shellz had nowhere to live, he had to move around and live with his friends, from house to house. How can you really expect an orphan 11-year-old, who grew up in a poor household in one of Chicago's worst ghettos, where he has to fight almost every day, where children do not dare to go to school because they are afraid to make sound life choices? I have seen too many people in my comments judging these children. Because that's also what you need to remember, many of these members made these choices as children, because they could not see any other way out. They were forced. Many of them had no adult role model who could guide them at an early age on what is right and wrong. Society must be there already at that age to help. As Shoota Shellz became an orphan at an early age, he had to make difficult and adult decisions throughout his teens. Many children in Chicago who grow up in the ghetto don't get the chance to be children. This is the reason why gang members, who are in their 20s, have a much more mature mindset than a 20-year-old who grew up in the suburbs. For example, when you listen to Shoota Shellz's interview with Zach TV, he seems to be much older than he really is. Zach TV was even surprised when Cedrone told him he was only 21 years old. Of course, due to everything that was going on in Shoota Shellz's life, it had an effect on his mood and how he behaved. Lil Bibby explained this very well in an interview with DJ Vlad. Bibby was angry all the time because of what was going on in his household. His mother went on drugs and said she hated him. This made Lil Bibby constantly angry, and therefore used to do the same thing every day, be out with his friends and beat up people. He said it's sad to say it, but it made him feel better. It was a way for him to release his anger.
How old you is, bro? Like 28?
Yeah, I'm 28.
You 30?
20, 30.
What the fuck? And let me guess, 29?
21.
Bro, you 21, bro?
Yeah, man.
What the fuck? How you age so quick? What the fuck going on, bro?
Man, I've been through a lot in my life, man. Even my OG passed when I was like 11. My pops died when I was like 9.
Hold on, bro. Yo.
That shit it's a lot, you feel me? You know, you deal with family issues, you feel me? It's all type of shit, you feel me? Motherfuckers go on and they like, and then to come to this shit, you feel me? All this street shit, that's a lot. A motherfucker gotta mature. You gotta mature fast. You gotta grow up. You gotta take care of yourself out here. You feel me?
Like I said, Shoota Shellz got into fights almost every day. There were constant fights between different schools from other areas where members of No Limit attended. One person Shoota Shellz had a very personal beef with was the rapper G Herbo, or Lil Herbo as he was called at the time. The reason for the beef between the two was the fights that occurred between No Limit and BlackMobb, where both Lil Herbo and Shoota Shellz participated, and where Shoota Shellz several times have stated that BlackMobb used to chase Lil Herbo away from the area, and that he is not about that life as he says he is. However, it was not Shoota Shellz who started with these mocking comments, at least not to the public. It was actually Lil Herbo who started mocking Shoota Shellz in one of his early songs back in 2011 to 2012. In the song, I'm a Boss, featuring Lil Bibby, Lil Herbo raps, I see Shoota, Blam the 8, and in the song, My Hood, which is also featured by Lil Bibby, Lil Herbo raps, Go tell Shoota we name changing. Lil Herbo has also constantly mocked BlackMobb throughout his career.
Another thing I gotta say about like with the Herb situation, motherfuckers talking about clout chasing, like motherfuckers I hate motherfuckers from the outside of Chicago, they just be staying looking in to he clout chasing. I'm reading the comments and shit, you know, ain't nobody clout chasing it. This shit been going on way before that. They chasing nigga home from high school, all that shit, whooping them, all that.
Whoa,
Yeah.
So, hold up, somebody got chased?
You say what?
Lil Herb.
Oh.
Man, they chased that
What's
man.
up? I don't, you not.
Way
not
before,
really
like, you know what I'm saying? Back in the time, way before this rapper shit got the poppin'. Way before they started rapping, they was shorties.
This was really the real starting shot between the personal beef between the two. Shoota Shellz says in the interview with Zach TV that he was very surprised when he heard Herbo mock him in a song for the first time. He said he thought it was weird because he often saw him in BlackMobb's neighborhood back when he lived there, but that Lil Herbo never did anything to them. What he meant was that he did not think Herb showed the same energy on the street towards BlackMobb and towards Shoota Shellz as he did in his songs. Shoota Shellz mocked Lil Herbo back in one of his early songs, however, it did not get as much attention as he did not have the same attention as Herbo. This caused Shoota Shellz to allegedly try to kill Herbo, but never succeeded, and every time BlackMobb saw him in their territory, they chased him away. All of this was a big reason why G Herbo mocked BlackMobb and Shoota Shellz as much as he has actually done, and still does. Then one must also not forget that the absolute biggest reason why he hates them is because they managed to take many of his friends away from him.
That's where it's funny at. BlackMobb killer. Them niggas Thundercats. Yeah, they brave pussies. First they tough them hammers up, then they the same pussies.
Just like I said before, the beef between BlackMobb and No Limit started with fights between the two gangs, But what many people actually do not know is that BlackMobb and No Limit used to be cordial with each other at one point. But before we go into the reason why guns became involved, which later led to bodies being dropped, I will tell you a little about BlackMobb, their members, history, and who Shoota Shellz was close to. BlackMobb is a fairly small set on the east side of Chicago. It started as a group of friends who grew up together who later became BlackMobb. It is a brotherhood. BlackMobb houses mainly on 74th, 75th and Phillips and Shares, along with No Limit and Muskegon Boys, Terrortown. As you all know, No Limit and Muskegon Boys are merged, and are called NLMB, No Limit Muskegon Boys, or Never Leave My Brothers. The 80s and 90s were among the most violent decades in Chicago's history. The problems with drugs, gangs and murders were extreme. And it was actually the area of 75th to 79th Street and Colfax to Yates that was the worst area of the South Shore. This area became known as Terrortown. Terrortown was mostly controlled by the Black P. Stones and gangster disciples. It was even defined as a BPS area by Jeff Fort's son back in the 90s, where No Limit was, and still is, one of the main branches in the Black P. Stone Nation area Terrortown. BlackMobb as a gang has really existed since Terrortown became a thing in the 90s, so it's not a new set. BlackMobb is mainly a Maniac P. Stone set, but there are also members such as Shotty Hit who is a gangster disciple. Shoota Shellz was extremely close to members such as Shot Hit, SGH, Black, Scoobs, of course, and Eric. These were really the ones he was closest to, but because BlackMobb is such a small set, he was of course close to basically everyone. BlackMobb, like all other gangs in Chicago, has allies in their area. However, there has been a bit of back and forth about who are actually their allies. One set that BlackMobb has long been allied with is Lakeside. Many are relatives between the two gangs, and many have gone to school together. BlackMobb is also cool with a couple of other sets like KTS, Death Row and Pocket Town, which are all enemies of No Limit. Since NLMB is EBK, which stands for Everybody Killer, they are fighting against the entire eastern side of Chicago. They are being attacked on all fronts around Terrortown. No Limit is allied with Muskegon Boys and ABK. For example, both Fazo and Kobe were from Muskegon Boys. Some from No Limit are also cool with Circon City gangsters since they share the same enemies. However, NLMB has not always been EBK. Just as everyone knows, NLMB was first and foremost a Black P. Stone set, but later became a Renegade Stone, and still is in many ways even though most now claim EBK. However, there are members of No Limit who claim both BD, GD, EBK and Stones, so it is very mixed. Originally, No Limit was cool with most sets around Terrortown, because of them sharing the same nation with other gangs in the area. But after No Limit starting wars against many sets around the area for various reasons, and thereby going against their own nation, the different sets on the eastern side began to merge and go to war together against No Limit, which is by far the most resourceful gang on the east side, both in terms of money and members. Just like I mentioned before, BlackMobb and No Limit were cool with each other. Now I'll tell you what was the reason the war started, and why it was No Limit's fault. Back in the days when BlackMobb and No Limit used to be cool with each other, the gang's top priority was money, all thanks to the structure and leadership that existed in the gang from the older members. Especially No Limit has always been a gang that prioritizes money above all else. Extreme amounts of money were made every day thanks to members like Lil Bibby who did nothing but sell drugs. The older members taught the younger ones, which created a bond between the younger ones and the older ones, which does not exist today. Today there are lost kids who run around and kill each other. Anyway, No Limit sold drugs throughout Terrortown and even in BlackMobb's territory. To be allowed to do so, however, they had to pay tax and show respect to BlackMobb. An event that took place in 2009 would change the eastern side of Chicago forever, but especially the relationship between No Limit and BlackMobb. Devious Johnson, also known as Vito, who was 21 at the time, was out selling drugs in BlackMobb's territory. He did this without paying taxes, and also showed no further respect towards BlackMobb. Vito was violated by BlackMobb because of this, and was chased away from their block. Hellrail, who is currently running NLMB, told Vito that he would go and shoot someone from BlackMobb, which he did. The person he shot at was with his children at the incident. This was totally out of line with the street rules, and it was from there the expression, NLNL, came from, that stands for No Limit, No Law. This incident was the start of a long-running war between the two gangs with countless gang murders. Because just a few days after that incident, the first body would be dropped between BlackMobb and No Limit. BlackMobb wanted revenge because of what Vito did, and it ended up being Vito who was murdered in revenge. Vito was standing on the street a few blocks from his home in the South Shore neighborhood, in the 7800 block of South Essex Avenue, about 1:20 a.m. to be precise. BlackMobb was out in No Limit's area to look for Vito and found him standing there on the street. Boo from BlackMobb ran up to him and shot him in his chest. Vito was sadly pronounced dead at Advocate Christ Medical Center in Oak Lawn an hour after the shooting. Boo from BlackMobb, whose real name is Trinity Walton, was later charged with the murder and later convicted. Trinity was sentenced to 60 years in prison. He will be released in 2071. The murder of Vito took really hard on No Limit. It came as a shock to the members of No Limit. The war was now really on with BlackMobb. BlackMobb continued to pressure No Limit and continued shooting up their blocks. The elderly in No Limit did not tolerate this and were prepared for full war. NLMB directly became BMK and MK, which stands for BlackMobb Killer and Maniac Killer. However, it would take a long time before No Limit got revenge on BlackMobb. It was actually not until 2011, 2 years later. During the 2 years, they were still pressured by BlackMobb and No Limit's allies refused to help them, which resulted in No Limit becoming EBK. Everybody Killer, which resulted in new wars and tensions with their allies. Like I said, none of the No Limit allies helped NLMB in the war with BlackMobb, not even ABK. They remained neutral in the war, and were still cool with both gangs, which would later change for various reasons, which we will come to a little later in the story. Anyway, 2 years later, NLMB would even score against BlackMobb, and also take the lead a few months later. There was an important reason why No Limit eventually went to counterattack. The seniors in No Limit, not least Jeff Fort's nephew, constantly wanted to prevent the war with BlackMobb, and continue to keep the structure and things calm in Terrortown. However, in June 2011, several arrests were made in Terrortown when, among others, Jeff Fort's nephew was arrested. There were no longer any real senior figures who could stop the war now. Now the younger ones in No Limit started looking for revenge. Just days after the mass arrest, No Limit got their revenge. Pistol P from NLMB allegedly caught Hakeem from BlackMobb on the 2400 block of East 75th Street, and put multiple shots at him. He was sadly later pronounced dead at 11:20 a.m. at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. 5 months later, the next body was dropped in the war. Allegedly, Cratehead from No Limit caught Rayvon, only 18 years old, from BlackMobb, near a bus stop in the 2400 block of East 75th Street. According to rumors, Cratehead shot him in the back of the head and then fled the scene. Rayvon was tragically later pronounced dead at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. In 2011, Shoota Shellz was actually shot. Where he was actually shot, I'm not entirely sure. However, I've heard it was in the leg, but like I said, I'm not sure. I'm also not sure who was behind it, although of course it is rumored that it was No Limit. Now we jump forward 2 years in history, to 2013. It would be the bloodiest year in history between the two gangs, not least during the summer. And during that summer, Shoota Shellz caught 3 bodies within 2 months. To be completely honest, NLMB actually terrorized BlackMobb at the beginning of the war. However, it would not be that long. BlackMobb, which was a fairly small gang, knew what they were up against. No Limit is one of the biggest gangs in Chicago that controls large parts of Terror Town, has endless with shooters and drug dealers who pull in extreme amounts of money. BlackMobb knew it was going to be tough. In early 2013, it was rumored that Wet M Up and Cratehead killed Lucky from BlackMobb. However, I don't have the date when he was killed, but from what I have heard, he was killed in early 2013. In the early summer of 2013, T-Bone from BlackMobb was allegedly killed by Doo-Wop and his brother Capo, both from NLMB-GBE. G. Mineski from NLMB was allegedly also in the car during the hit. This was the start of the bloody summer between BlackMobb and No Limit, and after T-Bone's death, No Limit was up on BlackMobb with 3 bodies. However, that would soon change. No Limit and BlackMobb slid on each other all the time during that summer, back and forth shooting up each other's blocks. Simo from No Limit was one of many members who slide almost every day on BlackMobb that summer. What he used to do was go lurking on BlackMobb territory, and if he saw anyone it was on sight. In order not to be taken by the police or not to be shot himself, he used to hide in stores or barber shops. It worked for the most part, but in the end he was caught after trying to hide in a store, not by the police but by BlackMobb, and Shoota Shellz in particular. On June 26, 2013, after sliding on BlackMobb, Simo tried to hide in a store but was thrown out by the store owner. Allegedly, SGH, Shawtyhead and Shoota Shellz were out at the time and spotted him near the store in the 7500 block of Yates Boulevard. Shoota Shellz allegedly ran up to him and shot him repeatedly in the head and chest before fleeing the scene. Simo, whose real name was Cortez Bailey, was taken in serious to critical condition to Northwestern Memorial Hospital, where he was pronounced dead. When Sierra Bailey, Simo's big sister, talked to her little brother earlier that week, she asked if he was okay. She had apparently heard that he and his friends were into it with another group in their South Shore neighborhood. Simo told her not to worry and that people were just tweaking. He was always like that, she said. He did not want us to worry about him, but we did. Simo was the only son in the family and the youngest of the 3 children. According to the sister, Simo was no stranger to violence. He had seen people shot before and even saw when his best friend was shot dead in 2010. When the family got the call that Simo had been shot, they rushed to the hospital. After doctors notified them Bailey was dead, his mother asked if they could reattach him to the life support machines, just to see if they could bring him back. Bailey's mother remembered her son as smart and handsome. He was a loving uncle who was always available to babysit, his sister said, and his mother said Bailey was a respectful kid even if he got too involved with the world. This was the start of 2 bloody months in the summer of 2013. Only 4 days later, another life would be taken, and another family would mourn. This time it would slam in the other direction. Jordan from BlackMobb, whose real name was Jordan Jefferson, was standing outside in the 2400 block of East 75th Street in the South Shore neighborhood. Allegedly, Crazy James, Mad Max and Cairo, all from No Limit, were out and spotted him, and allegedly ran up to him and shot him in his head 3 times. Jordan was tragically pronounced dead at the scene. Jordan had recently been paroled after serving time for a drug-related charge which he was arrested for in 2011, and was seeking guidance from a pastor before he was killed. Like I said, Jordan was shot in the head in the 2400 block of East 75th Street at about 3:20 p.m. He was pronounced dead on the scene from multiple gunshot wounds. Down the street from where he lay covered in a sheet, a woman screamed, "He's my brother," as friends hugged her. Isaac Whitman, pastor at the Greater Metropolitan Church of Christ, said Jordan came to him in the last few days. He stood as the man's friends made a memorial near the scene of the shooting right outside his church. Isaac says Jordan came to him that week and said he would come to church on Sunday. Sunday morning, Jordan was waiting for Whitman at the church, and helped him carry supplies into the office. He attended the service, but expressed uncertainty about joining the church, Whitman said. After the service, Jordan and Whitman's son walked to a corner store. "I heard the pop pop pop, 3 bullets, Whitman said. "I saw the man land from a distance." According to the pastor, a bullet was close to hitting his son. Fortunately it did not. 3 days after the murder of Jordan, it turned the other way again, and BlackMobb, but especially Shoota Shellz, would get revenge for Jordan, Lucky, D-Bone and Rayvon, but especially Hakeem, because they caught his alleged killer, Pistol P from No Limit, and it is rumored again to have been Shoota Shellz together with Shotty Hit along with another guy named AWOL from BlackMobb. It is rumored that Shoota Shellz, AWOL and Shotty Hit were out sliding, looking to get back after the death of Jordan. They spotted Pistol P around 6:50 p.m. in the 2400 block of East 79th Street. They braked the car. AWOL and Shoota Shellz then allegedly jumped out of the car and shot Pistol P in the back, who tried to run as soon as he saw them jump out of the car. Pistol P ran around the corner into the 7900 block of South Phillips Avenue and collapsed. Pistol P, whose real name was Rayford Brown, was later pronounced dead at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Only 25 days later it was time again for BlackMobb to score on NLMB, and it was none other than Shoota Shellz again who was the alleged killer. This would be his third body that summer. Shoota Shellz, along with Shawty Hit and SGH, really terrorized NLMB and gave them a hard time. That's why NLMB hates him so much. Those three used to literally come through and shoot up No Limit almost every day. Pocket Town, MTG, Lakeside, KTS and other sets did the same, with people like KTS Vaughn, Spook, Denny G, Pasto and Dre in the lead. No Limit was literally attacked from all sides around Terror Town, yet they still managed to keep up with most of the beefs, much thanks to the fact that they were so deep. That way No Limit often outlasted most of their enemies. It was like Lil Bibby says in the intro, people used to come through and shoot up their block every day.
Because people used to come through shooting us every day. And this block, words can't even explain, can't even explain.
Like I said, 25 days later it was time again. On July 29th, 2013, Shoota Shellz, once again with Shawty Hit, was allegedly out looking for enemies in Terror Town, mostly from No Limit. They went to 79th Street and Oglesby Avenue, which is neither No Limit's nor BlackMobb area. However, it is not very far from No Limit's hood. They spotted Richie Rich from No Limit. Shoota Shellz emerged from an alley and allegedly shot Richie Rich in his head and neck multiple times, before fleeing the crime scene along with Shawty Hit. Richie was taken to South Shore Hospital in serious condition, and was later tragically pronounced dead. Richie Rich, whose real name was Richard Pierce, was an older member of No Limit, 30 years to be exact. According to rumors, he was definitely not a bystander and was heavily connected to No Limit, and did the same thing as Alamo from No Limit, namely teaching younger members to sell drugs. Just a week later, after No Limit's loss of Richie Rich, they lost another member, Kobe, who was allegedly killed by KTS Vaughn, Rio and Pasto. If you want to know more about it, you should check out the history of KTS Vaughn. 1 week after the loss of Kobe, however, No Limit would get their revenge on BlackMobb after the murder of Richie. They did so by killing one of BlackMobb's older members, 34-year-old Eric. Eric was standing in a parking lot with one other man on the 7400 block of South Colfax Avenue. According to rumors, it was Crazy James and Mad Max who were out that night driving around in a light-colored SUV, looking for BlackMobb members. They spotted Eric and Mad Max open fire from inside the car. Eric sustained wounds to his back and leg and was taken to Northwestern Memorial Hospital where he later died. A small group of people watched from a store across East 75th Street. One man, who declined to be named, said he recognized Eric from around the neighborhood. He wasn't in no gang, the man said. He just had a baby. However, Eric was a known gang member to the police. A woman standing in the group said the area has seen a lot of shootings over the summer. After the murder of Eric, the war calmed down for about a year and a half. There was a reason for that, for in 2014 Shoota Shellz was locked up for a gun, much thanks to a girl he lived with at the time. Shoota Shellz lived with a girl in BlackMobb's area, 74th and Phillips. The apartment of course contained drugs and weapons, and since Shoota Shellz was a high priority for the police after the murders in 2013, the police wanted to put him away in some way. They could find sufficient evidence of the murders, so they decided to raid her apartment where he lived. But in order to do this, they had to get a permit for the girl, which they got. This allowed them to find weapons and drugs that they could put on Shoota Shellz, which resulted in Shoota Shellz getting locked up and not coming out until either the end of 2015 or the beginning of 2016. Because the war with BlackMobb calmed down in 2014, No Limit concentrated on the war with MTG. Now we come to the war between BlackMobb and ABK. When exactly the problems started between BlackMobb and ABK is very unknown. However, it was before the murder that really started the war in the end of May 2014 that we will get to it soon. ABK were actually BlackMobb's allies once upon a time. They never fought against No Limit but remained neutral in the war, but they were still more cool with BlackMobb. However, that would change. ABK came closer to NLMB after a few years, and many within ABK had personal problems with other BlackMobb members, which made them start to get cool with NLMB. Of course, this made BlackMobb feel some type of way. They felt that ABK was starting to lean more towards NLMB. In the end, this led to a series of shootings between ABK and BlackMobb, and in the end of May 2014, the war would really pop off between the two gangs. As the war had calmed down between No Limit and BlackMobb, and as No Limit focused more on MTG, BlackMobb began to focus on ABK. BlackMobb came through and shot up ABK several times at the beginning of 2014, which resulted in ABK going into a counterattack and killing Shoota Shellz's brother. Just as I said before, Shoota Shellz got locked up in early 2014. This calmed the war with No Limit, and BlackMobb could instead focus on the new war with ABK. While Shoota Shellz was locked up, he tragically lost his blood brother, King Scoobs. However, it was not No Limit who killed him as many believed from the beginning. The guy who allegedly killed him was from ABK, which means that it was ABK who drew the first blood in the war with BlackMobb. King Scoobs, whose real name was Craig Mitchell, was standing outside in the 2400 block of East 74th Street at 12:30 p.m., near 74th and Phillips Avenue, which is BlackMobb's territory. According to rumors, Yogi from ABK was out looking for BlackMobb members. He spotted Scoobs and allegedly ran up to him, with no second thoughts, and shot him multiple times before fleeing the scene. Scoobs, who was only 21 at the time, was tragically pronounced dead at the scene at 1:03 p.m. Scoobs was known to the police as a gang member, and to the street as a shooter and killer. Many have speculated that Scoobs was killed by an ABK member because many have believed that Scoobs killed someone from ABK. However, this is not true. According to rumors, he has a body on another set on the east side, but it was not ABK. It has also been rumored to have been involved in 1 or 2 murders of No Limit members. However, the reason he was killed by ABK is alleged to be due to personal issues Scoobs had with Lil Fame and Yogi from ABK. What the problems were is unknown. 4 months after the murder, Lil Fame was actually killed, but not by BlackMobb. He was killed by Davey and Robert from 078 BNC Cole's mob. They were later convicted of the murder of 16-year-old Fame. The murder of Scoobs took an incredible toll on his brother Shoota Shellz. Shoota Shellz, who was locked up when Scoobs was killed, really suffered in prison. Imagine being locked in behind walls and hearing that your blood brother has been shot dead. In addition, by people with whom you were once allied with. Shoota Shellz could not do anything. You can compare it to when King Von lost Roy while being locked up. These are the results of being in the street. You will lose loved ones. Another person who took Scoobs' death very hard was Shawty Hit, who many have actually speculated to have also been Shoota Shellz and Scoobs' blood brother as well. Some say, however, that it is not true, but whether it is true or not, they were just like brothers. Following the murder of Scoobs, it is alleged that Shawty Hit once again went on a murder spree, and once again it was on No Limit. In 2015, Shawty Hit was truly BlackMobb's main shooter. About 7 months after the murder of Scoobs, it is rumored that Shawty Hit killed Molly from NLMB. About a year later it was time again. Shawty Hit had now caught his 4th or 5th body after allegedly killing One Eye from No Limit. Shawty Hit was really going crazy, and was without a doubt one of the biggest threats against both No Limit and ABK, especially against ABK after the murder of Shoota Shellz, which we will come to later. Shortly after the murder of One Eye, Shoota Shellz was out on the streets again after being booked for 18 months. To make a long story short, Shoota Shellz was looking for blood after the murder of his brother. He had now lost his mother, father and brother, basically his entire family. There are probably no words that can describe what anger and sadness Shoota Shellz had. However, BlackMobb got a setback around the same time Shoota Shellz came out. It is alleged that Mad Max from No Limit killed Deo from BlackMobb sometime in early 2016. Shoota Shellz was constantly out looking for Yogi from ABK when he came out, and I'm really talking about a constant lurking for Yogi. He really wanted to get rid of him because of what he did to his brother. Shawty Hit, SGH and Shoota Shellz also created Scooby Soldiers in Scoob's honor. Eventually, after a long period of hunting, Shoota Shellz would allegedly get his revenge. On June 27, 2016, Shoota Shellz caught his 4th body and his first on ABK. Yogi, 20, was outside with another man, 18. In the 7400 block of South Shore Drive. Shoota Shellz, who was allegedly out in the traffic, spotted him, and jumped out of the vehicle and ran up to Yogi and the other man, and reportedly started shooting both. The 18-year-old man managed to escape after being shot in the armpit. Yogi, however, fell to the ground, and Shoota Shellz stood over him and repeatedly shot him in the face before running back to the car, and then sped away from the scene. The 18-year-old man was taken in critical condition to Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Fortunately, the doctors managed to save his life. Yogi, however, who caught multiple face shots and shots to the chest, could tragically not be saved. Yogi's real name was DeJuan Williams. After the murder of Yogi, it was quite quiet on the streets for a little less than a year. There were still a lot of shootings just as usual in Terror Town, but there were no deaths between either BlackMobb and No Limit, or between BlackMobb and ABK. As many of you already know, Shoota Shellz was not only known for what he did in the street but also for his music, which he released under the artist name Shoota Shellz. However, he did not get much attention for his music until he released the song, Death of 150. Many people think that Shoota Shellz started making music in 2017, but the fact is that he has been making music since 2013. The earliest song I found by Shoota Shellz was released on January 31st, 2013. The song is called People Hate. 8 months later he released another song called People Know. Already here in the early songs you could hear his talent for both flow and lyrics. However, Shoota Shellz was tragically just too caught up in the streets to be able to focus on the music entirely. As you all know, Shoota Shellz mocked many people in his songs. For example, in the song Godfather, featuring Trap Mo from BlackMobb, which was released on March 21st, 2017, Shoota Shellz mocks Yogi from ABK, who he allegedly shot dead with several shots to the face. He mocked him by saying, "Now Browski smokes so much of Yogi, he ain't even high." One song you all really should listen to by Shoota Shellz is the song Price of the Streets. That song is really in class with King Von's story songs. He talks about his upbringing, the loss of his parents and brother, and that he became a stone because of his brother. Now we begin to come to the end of the story, but there is a little more to tell. Only 9 days after Shoota Shellz released the song, Godfather featuring Trap Mo, it is rumored that they caught a body together along with 2 other BlackMobb members, SGH and Shaky. This would be Shoota Shellz's 5th and final body and the 4th on No Limit. I'm talking about the murder that just hours later would lead to a quadruple murder at a restaurant on 75th Street in Coles Avenue. Of course I'm talking about the murder of Wet M-Up's dad, Big Wet from No Limit. On March 29, 2017, it was time again. Big Wet, whose real name was Jerry Jacobs, was walking on the sidewalk at 11:13 p.m. March 29 in the 7900 block of South Phillips. Suddenly a dark vehicle drove up and braked. 4 men jumped out of the car and shot Jerry in the right side of the stomach. Jerry managed to escape the other shots that came from the 4 men and managed to take himself to South Shore Hospital. He was later transferred to Strodger Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 3:40 a.m. Thursday, March 30th. The 4 men who jumped out of the car were rumored to be Shoota Shellz, Trap Mo, SGH and Shaky from BlackMobb. Big Wet, 37, was a well-documented gang member of No Limit. According to police, Big Wet has twice been arrested on murder charges back in the days. It was not immediately clear whether those arrests led to convictions. This goes hand in hand with what I've heard about Big Wet being a killer and a shooter. Big Wet also had nearly 4 dozen arrests during his lifetime according to the police. Like I said, this was the murder that would later lead to a mass murder in a restaurant. Because less than 24 hours after Big Wet was shot to death, his son was to take revenge, but against the wrong people who had nothing to do with his father's murder, at least as far as we know. According to police, Wet M-Up went to the Nadia Fish and Chicken restaurant at the corner of East 75th Street and South Coles Avenue, which is within a mile of where his father's blood was spilled. In the restaurant sat 4 young men: Dylan Jackson, 20, his brother, Raheem Jackson, 19, Emmanuel Stokes, 28, and Edwin Davis, 32. According to police, there was clear evidence that Wet M-Up entered the restaurant and shot Edwin and Emmanuel multiple times in the restaurant. The brothers Dylan and Raheem managed to escape from the restaurant as gunfire erupted, but both were fatally shot in different parking lots within a block of the restaurant, authorities said. According to rumors, No Limit Mad Max killed one of the brothers who ran from the restaurant when he helped Wet M-Up in connection with the murders. Tragically, all 4 were pronounced dead shortly after the shooting. No Limit Wet M Up, whose real name is Maurice Harris, was arrested and charged with the murders only a week after the murder, after eyewitnesses pointed him out as the lone shooter. This quadruple murder became a high-profile investigation for the police. At the press conference after they arrested 19-year-old Maurice for the murder, the police said that he's no stranger to CPD nor is he unfamiliar with using an illegal handgun. This only proves what knowledge the police actually have about these members. They know what they are doing, but it is impossible to keep up the investigations and step with the murders. That is why so few murders are actually solved. They simply do not have the time or resources for it. Maurice Harris, who faced 4 counts of first-degree murder, was denied bail on Wednesday, April 5th and due back in court on April 25th. However, as you all know, Wet M Up was released in late 2020 for lack of evidence and is currently a free man. I will go deeper into this in the history of No Limit Wet M Up. Shoota Shellz had now allegedly caught 5 bodies. C-Mo, Pistol P, Richie Rich, Yogi and Big Wet. So these are 4 bodies only on No Limit, and 1 at ABK in revenge for his brother. Just as I have said in previous videos, including the video about 051 Melly, it is very unusual for a member to have 3 to 4 bodies on one set. There are a handful of members who have it, but it is very unusual. The member who had the most on BlackMobb was Mad Max, who was No Limit's main shooter and killer with 2 to 3 bodies on BlackMobb. Shoota Shellz was the biggest threat to No Limit, and Mad Max was the biggest threat to BlackMobb, and both of their lives would be taken a year apart. Shoota Shellz himself has also hinted about his body count. In the song Real Ones, which he released on May 22, 2017, Shoota Shellz raps, "I'm talking my count alone, I got a whole nick." For those who do not know, nick is an abbreviation of the word nickel. A nickel is a 5-cent coin. Shoota Shellz himself claims that he has 5 bodies.
Speak about bro, cause they don't know shit. I'm talking my count alone, I got a whole nick.
On April 6, 2017, Shoota Shellz released his by far most famous song and most acclaimed, much due to the fact that he was murdered 3 months later. Of course I am talking about the song Death of 150. However, the song not only received attention after his death, it also received it before the murder. This was because Death of 150 is incredibly scornful and disrespectful to his enemies, No Limit and ABK. He starts the song with a pretty clear mockery of rapper Lil Herbo when he says, "I see your rapping ass do not want to shoot. To get to you I see I had to step in the booth." He also mocked ABK Yogi when he said, "2 shots to the face then give them 2 more to the head." The whole song was incredibly disrespectful, but the ending was on another level. He concluded by mentioning a number of dead members from No Limit, among others, Feuds, Kobe, Pistol P, C-Mo and Capo. However, as we've seen many times before in Chicago, a rapper releases a diss song, and is then killed or shot a few days, weeks or months later. We saw it with FBG Duck, Wooski, Lil Mark and now Shoota Shellz. And now people will say, but he was not killed because of the song, which is completely correct, because he did an incredible amount of dirt in the street. But it cannot be a coincidence that many of these rappers die after releasing a disrespectful song, no matter how much dirt they have done on the street. Many gangs want to make an example of rappers who release diss songs. They want to show that you cannot get away with mocking them, and because you know that there will be a lot of attention, you want to do it even more. We have now reached the end of Shoota Shellz's story. On July 10, 2017, Shoota Shellz's life would tragically come to an end when he was murdered in broad daylight. A hit that would go down as one of the dirtiest kills in Chicago in a long time. Shoota Shellz was about to get into his car in the Auburn Gresham community when 3 men exited a white Nissan Altima and opened fire on that July morning. The three men ran up to Shoota Shellz and shot him multiple times in both his body and head. When he fell to the ground, it is alleged that they took turns shooting him in the head. Shoota Shellz was shot approximately between 15 and 18 times in the head. There are pictures out on the internet when he is lying on the ground. However, the picture is absolutely nothing I will show here, and nothing I recommend you to look at. The three men then jumped into the car and sped off from the scene. The three men left Shoota Shellz there on the street with half his head shot off. Police recovered 43 shell casings near his body. This was indeed a heinous and grotesque murder that has unfortunately been seen far too many times in Chicago. Of course, I do not mean that any murder is less heinous than anything else. It is still a life that is lost. But this was really awful. Just as with the murder of KTS Vaughn, there are different theories about who and what gang was actually behind the murder. Some speculate that it was actually No Limit that was behind it, and that Mad Max was one of the shooters. What supports that theory is that the murder is now being investigated by the FBI, and that the FBI has been commissioned for some time to investigate the year-long, back-and-forth violence between BlackMobb and No Limit. Both G Herbo and Lil Bibby have also mocked Shoota Shellz in several songs. For example, in the song 4 Minutes of Hell, Part 5, G Herbo raps, "Can't think back on his decisions now he ain't got no head," and in the song, Crack Baby, Lil Bibby raps, "The last nigga dissed the gang, his brains was all sloppy." Some also speculate that the FBI has been involved because No Limit has famous rappers with a lot of money like G Herbo and Lil Bibby, who may have been involved in the murder, and that this is an attempt by the FBI to lock them up. It is very common in Chicago that rappers pay for weapons that are later used in murders, and put money on people's heads. In the year and a half since the FBI took over the investigation, no charges have been brought in connection with Dole's slang. The investigation remains ongoing, police said. An autopsy report laid out the grim details. Dole's was shot in the head, chest, right arm, right thigh, right foot, right calf and buttocks. He also suffered graze wounds to his left forearm and right wrist.
No bread, can't think back on his decisions now. He ain't got no head. Niggas don't really.
Would y'all stop commenting shit on my page? Get the fuck off my page if y'all finna comment all this lame ass shit. I already know everything that's going on. Leave me the fuck alone. I don't know nothing about none of y'all ass the police on Vito. Get the fuck off my page with that gay ass shit. I don't know nothing about nothing about nothing about nothing. Get the fuck off my page before I don't get on live and block all y'all ass.
Principal.
Get the fuck on. Leave me the fuck alone. Don't folks.
You got man.
I don't know nothing about nobody, bro. Everybody broke as hell, bro. If your ass ain't rich or No Limit, I don't give a fuck about you folks. Leave me the fuck alone, folks. Suck dick, I don't give a fuck about none of that shit. Get the fuck off my page. Y'all ass goofy as hell. Bitch. I don't fucking care, bitch. You think I'm a bitch. I got an Instagram just like y'all, bitch. I know what the fuck going on. Get the fuck on, right or wrong. Lasky folk, get the fuck off my page. Suck dick on Vito. Get the fuck on.
The second theory about who and what gang was actually behind the murder of Shoota Shellz is the theory about ABK. According to that theory, 3 members of ABK jumped out and killed Shoota Shellz. According to rumors, it was Puff, Juju and T Glizzy, all 3 from ABK. They also had a driver, however, I'm not entirely sure who it was, but according to the rumors, I have heard it was Diddy Wop from ABK. What supports this theory is that it was revenge for what Shoota Shellz did to Yogi, and that was why they gave Shoota Shellz face shots. Another thing that supports this theory is that BlackMobb went on a rampage on ABK, especially Shawty Hit and SGH, who really carried the whole BlackMobb. 2 of the 4 from ABK, who are alleged to have been present at the murder, are dead, Puff and Diddy Wop. Puff was found dead in a lake in April 2020, however, this was personal and had nothing to do with BlackMobb or ABK. Diddy Wop, however, was sitting in Uber at a red light in 75th Street and Stony Island Avenue at about 2:10 a.m. when a tan-colored vehicle pulled up, and someone inside opened fire. This someone was allegedly Shawty Hit and SGH. Diddy Wop was shot multiple times in the face and neck. This happened in February 2018, less than a year after the murder of Shellz. Diddy Wop, 34, was tragically pronounced dead at the hospital. It is also rumored that Shawty Hit caught Jock from ABK the same year, 2018. BlackMobb really went crazy after Shoota Shellz. However, BlackMobb not only went on a rampage against ABK, but also against No Limit. 13 days after the murder of Shoota Shellz, G Slim from NLMB was killed. It is alleged that Hellrel from Lakeside, with the help of BlackMobb, caught G Slim about 5:15 a.m. in the 1500 block of East 82nd Street along with 2 other men. Both were shot. G Slim, whose real name was Lavondel Novel, 40, suffered gunshot wounds to the neck and right hand, and a 23-year-old man was shot in the face. G Slim was later pronounced dead at the hospital. Fortunately, the 23-year-old survived. Lakeside and BlackMobb did not stop there. Almost exactly 1 year later after the murder of Shoota Shellz, it was time again. This time they caught No Limit's main killer and G Herbo's best friend, Mad Max. Mad Max was shot twice in the back shortly after 3 p.m. August 3rd in the 7600 block of South Kingston. Mad Max was found slumped in the courtyard of an apartment complex in the South Shore. He had been shot twice by a rival gang member who kicked open a gate and chased him down. Mad Max, whose real name was Christopher Jackson, was rushed to the hospital and the doctors managed to keep him alive for a whole month before he tragically passed away. When he was on his deathbed, completely drugged out, at the University of Chicago Medical Center, he managed to give a videotaped statement identifying his attacks. Jackson died exactly a month after he was shot, and first-degree charges were filed a little more than a week later against Terrell Webb, also known as Hellrel from Lakeside, who was also allegedly killed by G Slim a year earlier. Hellrel was recently released for lack of evidence. According to rumors, Meech from BlackMobb was also involved in killing Max. Some even say that he was the only one who actually shot Max. Like I said, BlackMobb really went crazy after the murder of Shoota Shellz. Now the story of Shoota Shellz is over. I myself find this story, like many others, incredibly sad. A child who loses both his parents at an early age, has barely anywhere to live, was never allowed to be a child, got into criminal life, lost friends and his brother, and took the lives of other people's friends and brothers, and then suffered the same fate. When listening to his interviews, he seems like a very sharp and genuine guy but with a broken past. Thank you for watching the video. Please like, comment and subscribe. Rest in peace to all who lost their lives in the gang wars.